Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Gray Matters Radio. A show, like every good therapy session, operates somewhere in the world of the in-between, the gray area. I am your host, Michael Devine, America's counselor. You're probably asking yourself, why Gray Matters? Why do I need a counselor? Well, in case you haven't realized it, America is kind of caught in the middle of a bad marriage right now between Democrats, Republicans, and, well, damn near everybody else. And we're all caught in the middle. America is badly in need of therapy, and I decided to take America on as a client, pretty much against your will. So naturally, this is a tall order. You know, try to save the world one podcast show at a time. So I couldn't do it alone. I need some help. So I brought my best friend along, Bill Reed, the armchair quarterback, the armchair counselor himself.
Hey, Mike, how you doing, my man?
Doing good, man. Doing good. It's here we are, another show.
Another show. America is still continuing to be Munsoned.
They are
by our politicians.
They are.
I mean, really.
It was an interesting week, wasn't it?
I'll tell you what, it was, you know, and it just when you think it can't get any more exciting, I guess if that's the word you want to use.
Yeah, we can use it, yeah.
It's just, I don't even know what to say anymore. It's, you know, the bold and the beautiful ain't got shit on America.
No, man. It's, it's funny on the, in the syndicated, the live show I'm on, we, in our pre-production meeting, we were going, hey, do we want to talk about the Cohen thing? And we were all just like, what the fuck are we going to say?
What are we
going to say? Literally nothing happened. We had, literally, you'd think in a week of, all right, we had the president's personal attorney basically ratting on him, you know.
Can you believe him? I don't know. He's already lied once under oath.
Who knows? It's crazy, right?
I was lying before, but no. Now I'm telling you the truth.
It's one of those things to where I can't believe we're even having the discussion of, can you believe this? So we had that, right? So that where pretty much nothing happened, or nothing was said. That's amazing.
It was a hearing about
nothing. It was
nothing.
like 3 days of testimony, and literally nothing could really. It's crazy. And then we had hearings on Monday, where all the CEOs of all the pharmaceutical companies were out there, and literally, I was sitting there trying to find stuff that was said. Apparently, you can have all-day testimony with congressmen and all the CEOs of pharmaceutical companies, and not one person had anything to say about what was said in that. There's a recurring theme
You're
here.
Like,
you notice
I can't
that,
make
Bill?
this up. Well,
basically, anything that happens in our Congress, nothing really matters. Nothing comes out of it. Nothing important. Nothing groundbreaking.
It isn't interesting that a lot of the people that are, you know, under scrutiny and testifying, it seems like a lot of the people that are listening to these testimony and asking the questions, some of them are actually profiting off the people that are being questioned about their ethics and motives and action.
They're all being.
But I'm just saying, isn't that kind of ironic saying, well, yeah, you know, you and your company and people like you may donate to my campaign. However, now I'm going to ask you some.
I'm going to ask some hard-hitting questions here. I need to ask you about what golf club do you use if you're 120 yards out? I mean, literally, that's man.
Yeah.
I guess what's crazy about all this is that, so once again, we have a week where nothing really happened and everyone's arguing about it. Sucks all the oxygen out of the room.
People want to know, what does this mean?
What does this mean? But then meanwhile, there's actual, like, in the real world that we all live in, there's like real stuff going on, you know, like, I don't know, like we have issues with, you know, addiction, you know, crime, poverty, international trade, healthcare. I mean, there's all these very real problems, and we can't even talk about it.
I mean, real problems that are going to actually impact us, not whether or not somebody cheated on their taxes, or, you know, whether or not they, you know, inappropriately, you know, touched
exactly. That's
the campaign,
where we're at.
Advisor.
Now the thing is,
not that those things aren't important.
Exactly, Bill. It's not that they're not important,
but is that really the top news story and the breaking news, or is it, you know, now what is it? People are more likely to die from an overdose than they are in a car accident.
Yes.
That's insane.
Well, and a crazy thing is, on earlier shows, we talked about just the billions of dollars that's being put into prevention programs,
Yeah.
right? And now, listen, I'm not advocating that we just shouldn't spend money on it, but you got to sit there and ask yourself a question of, we keep spending more and more money, but the problem keeps getting worse.
Right.
I mean, legitimately, the problem keeps getting worse. And so you have to sit there and ask yourself, going, is more money the problem? Is prevention a problem, or is there more at play here? And to me, that's what I look at what the purpose of our show is about. Not even just with addiction, but everything is there's other ways to fix this problem. There's other ways of looking at it that, frankly, nobody is talking about because, well, it makes too much sense. Like, apparently, I don't know. I don't understand how addiction can be put in the crosshairs. So this is the one where I'm going to go, I don't know if they get it. Because I think I've been doing addiction, work and therapy work for, gosh, over 15 years. And it's taken me a long time to maybe really get an idea of what's going on. So maybe it's not realistic to expect that maybe congressmen who this is not their background, maybe they really don't understand. So that's where it's like, okay, let's have a conversation about what you guys can do, what you guys could do tomorrow to help fix this problem that you're not doing yet. And so the angle I want to talk about actually tonight is the criminal justice system. I think the criminal justice system is set up to keep people within the criminal justice system. I mean, do you know anyone, Bill, that has a felony?
I do. I do know several people that have felonies or have been to prison for, I think, pretty much all of them were drugs, if I'm not mistaken, or most of them. I don't know a lot of people, but the ones I do know, I believe they were all for drugs.
Yeah. And so the thing is, what is it? Have you seen what it's like for them? I mean, you and I have been talking as an employer, like saying,
Well, yeah, you always wonder about that because, even if you get out and you clean your life up, which is, not easy to do because you're addicted for a reason, but it's hard to then, become gainfully employed. And, like we had talked about, if you have a felony, it's definitely going to be much, much harder to land a decent job when you get out. So even if you're on the road to recovery, I think, and you want to, better yourself, it's not easy,
Yeah, and this is where, it's. I think I'm really frustrated and passionate about this very topic because I've had a lot of clients where they've just run into some really bad luck. I remember one client in particular. I'm trying to de-identify a lot. Basically, long story short, kid came from a good family, had really bad anxiety, was put on a medication for the anxiety, and started abusing it really bad. Now, this kid was like really smart, and so he literally, from like a chemistry perspective, almost like a Walter White deal, figured out how to make a certain product, like an extract, right? And was using that and doing it purely just to support his habit. Of course, one of the partners gets busted, he gets thrown under the bus, and then, lo and behold, kid gets a felony. Now, he had really good attorneys, and he did a lot of the good work. Went to rehab, went back to school, was working, started doing therapy, and, I mean, literally, even though he was able to stay out of jail and be on probation, he still had the felony on his record, and it came and get expunged, I think, for like 3 or 4 years. Was doing everything right. Literally, at the time when he went to try to get early release, from his felony. So he's like, 'cause I can't get an apartment. Like literally, he can't get an apartment.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, dude. Like, and so he couldn't get an apartment.
I didn't know that they could discriminate you. I
Yeah.
really thought I didn't know that.
Yeah, because they're looking at, we don't want people with felonies. That's why they do the background check. So
I
felony.
guess that makes sense.
So he couldn't do that. His dad couldn't help him out with co-signing because they were about to move and they couldn't have another apartment on the credit because it was going to affect them with their mortgage at the next place. Couldn't apply for the student loans yet because he had the felony.
So
Jobs.
you're not eligible for student loans either.
Yeah. It was really difficult for him to actually get a decent paying job because of the felony.
Right.
And so literally, if it wasn't for people who had a background with this that gave him a break, he was in a lot of trouble. And this kid literally was getting a master's degree. And it was this, and you hear stories about this over and over and over and over again. And you sit there and start going like, well, how do we expect people to stay clean? I mean, literally, like when you look at like research, when you look at people with addiction, I mean, literally, just some research, I'm not just gonna pull this stuff out of my butt, right? So, according to the Bureau of Justice, 68% of local jail inmates reported experiencing some criteria that met drug dependence. I'm not talking about like, oh, I got a little bit of a drug problem. We're talking dependence, meaning when they go to jail, like they can go through withdrawal symptoms. I mean, that's how heavily addicted they basically, kind of are. And what was interesting, 18% of inmates, it could have been robbery, it could have been breaking and entering. I mean, it could a wide range of felonies. 18% of them said they did that crime only to support the habit that they had.
Their drug need, yeah.
And when you look at positive outcomes with addiction, a lot of energy and effort's been on prevention and getting access to care. The reality is, though, that to me is I mean, it helps to get treatment, right? But the most important part of treatment is aftercare. And what I mean by that is aftercare is so most people, if you're doing it right, hopefully you can go to like a 30, 45-day program, which good luck if you don't have insurance,
Oh, yeah.
But it's like it's important, but it's like, okay, I mean, so 30, 45 days, but then aftercare starts where you have what they call transitional living and sober living. Sober living, and transitional living. So it's like you get out and you're going to stay in an apartment with other people for like, let's say 6 months. You're getting drug tested. You have to work. Some places where you're almost giving up part of your paycheck and it directly goes to it. You're going to AA meetings. And then the transitional living is more like an in-between of that and being off on your own. So a good aftercare program is 12 steps, being in a good group of people, being in a sober environment, work, job, support. That is the biggest predictor of success, sobriety, year, 2, 3, 4 years. But here's the problem, though. Most people can't really afford aftercare. It's like $2,000 a month sometimes.
Well, I mean, who can?
Who can, right?
An extra $2,000 a month. I mean, that's
so,
great.
So think perfect scenario is I got that, but a lot of people can't afford that. So then it's like, all right, where do those people go? Like, hey, well, maybe if once I get out, because a lot of people, let's face it, they're getting into trouble with the law because of their addiction, right? They get a felony on their record, they get out, or they have a DUI felony, and then I try to get a job, well, I can't get a good paying job. Let's say there was some drug dealing going on to support their habit. I want a legit job. I can barely get a job that's going to pay me anything to support myself. I can't get a good apartment, and maybe the apartments I can get are not in good parts of town. And so you put these people back in a bad environment, not a good paying job, not a good support system around them. And literally, when you look at addiction, the environment a lot of times is every bit as important as genetics, if not more important, and the reason why they have addiction to begin with. So we're sitting there looking at it going, well, the environment that made them probably be an addict to begin with, we're going to put them right back into it. And then not only that, now they're behind because they're getting out of jail, having their wages garnished by the government, and they can't even get a good job. So it's asinine. It's so obtuse to think that what would make us think that they would even have a chance of staying clean and sober or going back to selling and doing something to make a living. It's ridiculous. And so that's where we kind of start looking at going, well, what if we fix that? What if we had the ability to change, we had the ability to change the people in the criminal justice system, and when they get out with a felony, maybe like they can get a job. Maybe there are some rules about how things get expunged. Maybe there's certain criteria they have to meet. I don't know. But to me, I'm thinking like, wouldn't that technically be one of the best things we can do? There's this really cool research study that they did just to kind of visualize addiction. So they did a study with rats, okay?
It's always rats.
It's always rats, right? Because of their brains, the way it kind of works, there's a good corollary.
Well,
there.
Plus, they're the bottom of the food chain, too.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I mean, there's that,
People get mad when you test on rabbits because they're cute and furry.
Yeah.
But rats,
monkeys, they had it coming, right? So actually, the first study was done I think it was like in the 70s, where they got them addicted to cocaine. And how they did that was they had like 2 water bottles. They had the water bottle with just water, and then they had a cocaine-laced water bottle. Now, the thing is that they made it kind of like they had to discover it on their own. But here's the catch, though. If they drank from the normal water bottle, they got water and they got food. Now, if they went to the cocaine bottle, they didn't get any other water and they got no other food. So the interesting thing was is that when the rats started choosing and getting hooked on the cocaine, they were willingly putting away, like turning down food. And they would starve themselves to death just to get the cocaine. And they would not stop. It didn't matter if they were starving or nothing. So they initially did that study just to kind of show the effects of addiction. But a bunch of researchers, 20 some odd years later, went, well, wait a minute. Rats are kind of sociable beings like humans, and you had them in isolation. What if we did the experiment again, but only this time, instead of it being just about choosing food over the addiction, it was they had to make a choice between being around other rats who weren't using, or you get your drug and you could be by yourself. So they did the same exact experiment. Instead of the food, it was you get to interact with your other rat friends, right? What do you think happened this time?
I think the other rats knocked down the door and said, "Hey, I heard you guys are partying in here."
Good. That was a good one. That was a nice try. No, that's
Okay.
not what happened. What did happen was the rats, when given a choice of interacting with other sober rats, versus the drug,
They didn't want it, did
they
they?
didn't want it anymore.
Nope.
They literally
Just
stopped
like,
using. They
just
got them
like
hooked.
humans.
And I was saying they got them hooked first, and then they let them. And so I'm using that as a corollary to show the power of a positive environment, positive people on addiction and addiction recovery, and the choices that we make. And so that's where I keep going back to this thing of we got to give people a better chance to stay sober, to undo a mistake, basically. And the problem's only getting worse. Here's the reality. So it was really cool. I was looking for guests, and I was like, I want someone that can really talk to the idea of work, someone that can talk to the idea of the effect that a job and felonies and the criminal justice system and addiction. And I was like, where am I going to find this, right? So serendipitously, I can't even freaking talk today. So serendipitously, so I was on LinkedIn, and so I saw this video of, the owner's name is Sherry, and she was running an organization called Corporate Hustle. And what caught my attention was she was talking about people in the computer science industry. This Corporate Hustle, they're a staffing agency for second chances, people who have felonies, drug backgrounds, and the whole mission statement is everyone deserves a second chance if they're willing to basically, do what's necessary.
Right.
And I was like, wow, that got my attention. But she was talking about people like in the computer science industry, seeing how many more people, increasingly, with that background, because of they're on 72-hour grinds of coding, and
That's crazy.
yeah, dude, so it's like a meat grinder of these industries, right? And so they're looking for every edge. So they'll do like the stimulants, like cocaine, well, like Adderall, and then they'll go to illegal drugs like cocaine and meth, and then then they start kind of getting a little bit, rough around the edges. They get into legal problems. And so she even started noticing people with 4-year degrees, computer science, they can't even get jobs for Fortune 500 companies, all the big, because they can't get past the HR issue.
Well, I think a lot of people, when you think of, the old school way of thinking about addiction and addicts and recovery and things like that, typically the average American thinks it's a person that maybe, is of a lower income bracket or bad, background, rough upbringing, rough neighborhood, dropped out of school. Take your pick.
Yeah.
But now we're starting to see, and we're in America, it's starting to really kind of blow up and see it more in the news where it's hitting suburbia, it's hitting computer, programmers, people that you wouldn't normally.
Exactly.
Not saying that it doesn't happen, but now you're hearing more and more of it, and you're just seeing them spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
And you're just, wow, wait a minute, that's not supposed to happen in those areas for those people.
Exactly.
And that's what's scaring people now more than anything, I think.
Well, think about it. No, I totally agree. Because think about it. I mean, people, when you talk about criminal justice reform, think some hard, like some hardened criminal. It's like, no, this is your next door neighbor. So I saw, what they were kind of doing. I'm like, dude, this is awesome. So I reached out to Sherry and talked to her a little bit. And then she kind of go, hey, listen, you're going to talk with Juan. Juan is one of our head recruiters. And he, he's doing a lot of our radio. And so Juan and I talked a little off air. I'm like, dude, this is going to be awesome. So I'm going to take the time. So Juan, you there, my man?
I'm here.
All right.
Hey, Juan, how you doing?
Good.
Thanks for being here tonight, man. We really appreciate it. So tell us a little bit. Cornbread Hustle. I got even before you dive in, even the awesome stuff you guys are doing. All right, so what is Cornbread Hustle? Like, how, where does that even come from? What is the DNA behind it? Help me understand this.
So long story short, Cornbread Hustle is just another amazing staffing agency that focuses on second chances. We do look for meaningful employment because we know that people in recovery and of course coming out of the second chances of being in prison or lockup need that. They need that in this life as much as we need it in our economy. What we do, we do our best to filter through whoever's out there and looking for a job, uh, classifying themselves as second chancers. The people who already gave up on themselves, we try to remind them, saying, "Hey, you are a person. Uh, we know that you've got a history. We're willing to look into you. Talk to us. We're first things first. We're people. We care about them as an individual, and more importantly, are they willing to develop an improving characteristic which will always continue and which would help them and their family in the long run."
And I think that has to be tough to assess, I imagine, because I've worked with addiction for a long time and know, you know, of course I probably honed it over the years of knowing like what's BS and what isn't. How hard
hmm
is it to kind of assess like, okay, I think they're really interested in change and they're the right type of, person for us. Like, how do you figure that out?
Uh, and I'm gonna be honest. That's a great question, but the easiest response to that is: do they have motivation behind showing up for an interview? Do they have motivation behind presenting themselves accordingly? Uh, which where do they see themselves in the future? Not enough people who really think about what kind of job they want. They don't really think about uh, the long run. Should they not have a clear focus on the long run and where they want to be? Generally speaking, they're not ready for employment, and it causes them to go back to their character and say, okay, why am I not getting all these jobs, or more importantly, why am I getting these jobs and getting fired? Where's the common denominator?
It's that ability to kind of look at themselves in the mirror and go, hey, it's me, and maybe I need to make some changes.
Right.
So help me understand, like, so this is, I think everyone has a story of why they get into doing what it is they do. I know I have my own story of why, I went into, counseling. I have my own story of why, decided to do podcasting, just like Bill had his reason for why he wanted to be a co-host of a show. What is your story of what made you want to get involved in this particular industry and what's your passion behind it?
Uh, Mainly just because I'm it was I was affected by it. I was locked up at the age of 19. I served 7.5 years flat on that. When I got out when I was 27, I did another 6 months on paper. Um, and the whole experience is just it's something that I will never forget, and it's hard to ignore. A lot of people who do serve time in TDCJ or whatever's their state prisons, um, if the charge isn't um, eyebrow raising enough, they'll kind of slide it to the side. Um, Not everybody can do that, and I just kind of fell into the spot where I had to realize like, hey, uh, I'll do better in life if I just own um, my past, realize that I can do better out of my own sheer will, and of course, like how you're bringing up earlier, community. That really is very, very big. I mean, it played a huge role in my own life, and so of course I would love to talk about that.
I mean, honestly, just because I'm a clinician and I see it one way doesn't mean that that's necessarily truth. But I mean, honestly, would you almost argue, like, I think the way I'm arguing that almost community is almost the most important piece to recovery, at least long term sobriety?
100%,
Yeah.
100%. And the reason why is because most people who are using, if they weren't confident then, they are definitely not going to be confident afterwards. Uh, People tend to get, they turn into themselves and they'll get in their own head. Uh, what happens with that is low morale, and so their self-esteem will go down the drain. Should there be a community around them that lifts them up? or it's a little bit more understanding and kind of coaches them through that recovery, especially when you can see a brink where they're about to break through. Um, it's very necessary.
Well, I even like see like with my clients, it's really interesting. Like it's when you're around a community of people that are all trying to, whether it be they're already getting their shit straight, they're going in a good direction, like their shit's always been straight. If somebody messes up and they care about you, they're gonna go, dude, what the hell are you doing? Like I remember growing up, and Bill and I, we've had a lot of conversations when we were in college where we look at the things that we did, and if one person were to maybe go beyond a certain level, you would know there would be that like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Like, or even if you were hanging out with certain people, it'd be like, hey man, like, what gives?
Yeah, like too far.
Yeah, I remember even in grad school, like I had a really bad breakup, and I was a supervisor at an inpatient facility, and they were all undergrads, and so we'd go out the work, to the bars, and I remember at one of my good buddies, like, and I was really rough around the edges in the morning. I was holding it together, and he was even like, dude, like, he goes, listen, man, I know, God knows, like, I understand, like, man, you're in a rough spot, and hey, like, I get it. He goes, but dude, don't you think you're maybe doing it a little much, and maybe it's time just to kind of lay off? And it was just like, yeah, dude, you're right. And having that, being in a good environment to where, oh wow, I can't do that, I'm pushing, and I don't want to lose that. Heck, I know even when I was in undergrad, one of the big things that got my head out of my ass was finally realizing, oh, dude, I want to be like a therapist, and I can't be doing this. I can't get into grad school. I can't do any of this stuff and expect to be a counselor and expect to get into grad school. And it made me to where, like, I had a choice to make. I'm either going to party and not really care about things and just be about the moment, or I'm going to be thinking about the bigger picture of I want that career, and this gets in the way of that. And even though this is more fun, I want this thing. And so that's where I look at that community, those goals, that having hope, feeling valued, other people like of reflecting back to you have value. I know those are instrumental in my life. And then you hear once again, Juan, you're saying the same thing. We see it with clients. It's like, it is so important. But I mean, how frustrating is it, Juan, where we're all having this conversation right now going, dude, it makes all the sense in the world. But how frustrating is it for you to not see this conversation being had on a national stage?
It's rare. It's very. I think that as long as we can create more buzz behind it, I mean, it really is going to save the 70 million lives that are affected by incarceration alone.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's for people who are being affected by the judicial system, rightfully so or not. There's still that many people being affected by it, and for us to generate a buzz and just talk about what's true recovery, what's the true process of healing both the offender and the people that were affected by the offender, that's really where it starts off. Yeah.
I always think it's like weird, when I hear politicians talk, and maybe I'm the only one that gets this way, but I'm kind of a passionate guy, as Bill always says. I'll hear like congressmen talk about, oh, this is what the problem is, right? It could be criminal, it could be like recidivism.
Clearly they know.
And, like, and John Kasich actually was always pretty good, because he, like, I don't know if you know much of what's going on up here, but John Kasich was our governor, and he had a lot of initiatives with resources, giving people second chances. And so I think we were one of the few states where our recidivism rate actually went down. And so with the exception of maybe like a guy like Kasich, I hear a lot of these politicians talk about, well, here's the problem. And there's nothing more frustrating hearing someone telling this is what the problem is, and they clearly have no idea about what the problem is, but yet they speak about it with such conviction.
Well, if you know what the problem is, supposedly, why aren't you doing something about it? You're in a position of power. Come on.
Yeah. Well, it seems like, I mean, you're mentioning like 70 million people's lives in incarceration. How many billions of dollars is that?
Oh, man.
Everyone's complaining about Medicare, Medicaid, and, food stamps and welfare and what. If it's like, well, dude, if you just like help out with the dang criminal justice system, like recidivism rates, well, then guess what? People are making a living. You don't have to worry about it. that would make people actually have to do something first. You know, they
Right.
just want to cut Granny off at the knees. Apparently, I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, so one of the things that I'm always really big on, Juan, is politicians, media people can say whatever they want. They can throw a stat out there, and it doesn't mean anything. I'm always about, okay, what are people like that are actually doing it seeing, right? And so help me, like and you can maybe paint a picture for the listeners. Like, what is it like when you see somebody who has been incarcerated, someone that has, obviously not made the best decisions in life, and what do you see the effect that it has on their life where someone believes in them, they're getting a job, they have a second chance, and how does that affect them, not just from an addiction perspective, but just from a crime recidivism rate perspective?
That's really easy. I mean, it turns a lump of coal into a hero. I mean, that's the best way to paint it. Because if you really think about it, everybody who's already down, they're just feeling down about themselves. But as soon as you put that community behind that one person, all those resources. I mean, that's another thing. It does take resources to encourage an individual to make sure that they have an opportunity, a clear opportunity to get to work. And sometimes it's not just resources, it's just knowledge. For example, when I got out, for the first couple weeks, I really didn't know what to do. I'm 27. I got locked up when I was 19. The only job I had was working at Brahms, and I didn't know what to do with my life. So, yeah, I kind of binge watched Game of Thrones, and
Got caught
and
up.
I had to catch up with reality.
Who didn't?
What is this Netflix thing?
And I didn't know what Netflix was. I saw pictures of it, but after that, after my little time of figuring out um, who I am outside of prison, and waking up and realizing, oh yeah, this isn't a prison cell, or there isn't doors slamming. Then that's when I had to realize, okay, what am I going to do next? I need to generate an income, and
Was your
it
mindset almost like, even when you're out, was your mindset almost like, I'm still trapped?
it was, and I mean, I did my best. I knew that was going to happen, so I did my best to work around it, and I really think that what helped me the most was employment. And I can say that my first job was working at I was a busboy at Pizza Lounge uh, here in Dallas. So I'll still go to that place. I love their pizza. And but it was there when I realized, like, okay, I just got to get my feet wet. I just got to get back in society. I got to talk to the people who are affiliated with you know re- the recovery of the mindset of the individual coming out of prison, and just see who else is there, and just hang around them, learn from them, and of course do my best to not ruin my reputation, because I know how fragile it is.
And then when you kind of go from like that, then to like, okay, like, so how many years ago was that when you got out and then was working for that first year?
So on March 3rd, it would be exactly 2 years of me being released from prison.
So how do you get then from there to where you're at now? And I know, not to be a therapist or anything, I'm going to bring it in the moment though, of like, even like, what is it like looking back of where you've been since you've gotten out, and just from like a character perspective and a like pride
Ugh,
perspective, just all that, like, what's changed?
what's changed? Oh, that's a really good question. Hands down, my network, my friends, the people that I believe in, the people that I chose to believe in, I changed all that. Um, of course, I'm heavily involved with Cornbread Hustle, because they're huge on prison advocacy, or I'm sorry, prison reform advocacy, and then of course, um, employment for second chances. And so when I realized that there was local businesses and organizations that actually care about people like me, that's when I said, you know what, I'm gonna find a window of opportunity, and I'm just gonna go reach out and see who's there, what are they really talking about, who do they care about us, or is it something that, are they just in it for the gains, like any type of whatever benefit that they can get off of this. I really wanted to see who's out there and who's fake, because in prison there is a lot of real people and fake people, and so that's what I wanted to do, figure out who's real and who's fake.
And Bill, like, I don't know if like you kind of heard, like, even like I can hear it in the inflection in your voice, one. It's like we matter. I matter. I have value. Even as a basic human being, my feelings matter. I matter as a person. I have value. Other people see that. It's the most basic core thing of a human being, and just seeing like we're like in one like if I'm wrong, let me know. But it just seems like that's when we're talking about job and employment and your network and people. It's the best thing you get out of it. I matter, and it's mysteriously when you matter, I matter to other people. I matter to this environment, these people. Mysteriously, people, doesn't matter who they are, where they've been, they do good things.
Well, I think, like Juan had said earlier, he kind of touched on, people with addiction sometimes or a lot of times have low self-esteem maybe to begin with. And I think, that's maybe not a root cause, but I would think that's maybe part of what could possibly cause people to become addicted or at least, go down that path. So I think, when people do come out of after being incarcerated and are trying to get their life straight, maybe, just in general, maybe they don't have a lot of confidence just to begin with, even if none of this had happened to them. So, it is good that they're able to get that self-worth and realize, and set goals and be like, listen, like you said, I do matter. And, my feelings
And
count.
that's exactly what happened
Yeah.
with Cornbread
Yeah.
Hustle.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Cornbread Hustle, and I can say that the opportunity is really here, or at least in Dallas Fort Worth.
I think and that's where I wanted to talk with you a little bit about that part because, the opportunity. Because I imagine it. Maybe I could be wrong. Maybe it's not that hard. But how hard is it to find partners in the community? Because you guys are a staffing agency. How hard is it to find people and find organizations that are willing to work with you guys and give people a second chance? And are there stipulations? Do they go, okay, whether it be drug testing, whether it be you guys are doing the coaching, getting reports, like how does all that work?
Right. So there is a filtering process when it comes to who's going to be who also is going to be partnering in helping reducing recidivism in Dallas Fort Worth at least. And it's as simple as this. Whenever you sit down and have a full discussion with whoever's leading the organization or company, they just have a heart-to-heart conversation. If the people believe in other people, truthfully, honestly, and they care and they follow on everything that's related to their cause, then you know that they're true to their word. They're gonna care about the people that they're sending. They're gonna care about referrals. They're gonna care about their own reputation, and they're gonna care about whoever's reputation they're aligning themselves up with.
Do you find that the companies that you guys work with do they have like a personal stake in it, like family member, myself, or do you also just get people that just they kind of see the mission, they maybe see that bigger calling of hey, everyone deserves a second chance?
It's a little of a blend. More from my own experience. I can only speak out of my own experience. For those that I've met, who's supporting the second chance movement, um, they are personally affected. There is every once in a while, there's a true. I'm sorry. There's a person who's not, who hasn't had a family member or a person that they know directly affected. However, they understand the empathy behind it, and they just so happen to align their own morals behind it. Because of course, when it comes to talking about felons and hiring and job placement, there is that one discrimination that raises that flag, which is, have you had a felony?
And that's where I think it gets tough. And this is where I'm really curious to get your thoughts on this one because I think I can imagine because I work a lot with addiction, and work a lot with autism, and I found that when we're talking about organizations that are willing to, whether it be people with drug histories, felonies, people on the spectrum, where usually they have some personal vested interest in it to where they'll develop better programs or develop something that allows. But what I've kind of seen with bigger companies, it's kind of lacking. And, it almost seems like, yeah, with smaller companies, it's a little bit easier. But if we're talking about big change, widespread change, because there are so many people with felonies in the criminal justice system, it really seems like change needs to happen on a more federal level. What is it that, from all your experiences, things that you've seen that have gotten in the way, and then also being realistic, because I think we can sit there and be pie in the sky and go, well, if they just pass this, it will be awesome, and all right,
problem solved.
Yeah, like, that shit ain't gonna happen. So, I mean, if we're being realistic, Juan, based on everything you've seen with our criminal justice system, what needs to change on a more global federal level that might loosen things up and help people out?
Now that's a really good question. I can give you two examples
Yeah, please.
of my response. One would be, of course, what was passed just recently, the First Step Act. I don't know if you're too much familiar with that.
No, what is that? I know a little bit, but not really.
So there's this big movement with it's called hashtag First Step Act. Basically, what happened on December 1st of 2018, President Trump signed a bill into law. It's bringing us one step closer into fixing a broken criminal justice system that has torn like all the families and destroyed all the lives that are affected in the criminal justice system. So that's as far as on that level, I can say that there's some type of movement behind it. It is a bipartisan bill that was presented and of course signed. So as far as like on nationwide, there's one step.
Do you think it'll have a good effect, like a measurable effect?
It's a step. It's a step. And this is what I can say about our country is that we're steadily fixing ourselves. We're steadily moving forward. We do our best to pride ourselves as a first-class country. So it's definitely it should have happened a while back ago, but it's happening now.
But honestly, man, you know what? I dig your style on that one, because I think so many people that are in advocacy are so militant about it. Like, I want change and I want it now, and I don't give a fuck what it does. And it's like, all right, real change, it takes a while for it to happen. And
actually, it does matter.
And
does.
I've had so many. We've had some awesome guests on here, and all of these guests are all saying the same damn thing. Real change is going to take time, and we have to be patient with it. We're always going to want it to happen faster. But if we're being honest, okay, like, it is about baby steps. And so I totally respect that message you're putting out there for something you're so passionate about. Of, hey, I'm not happy with it, but it's a step, and we need having other steps in the right direction. So I love that, man. It's such a powerful statement. I think that everybody needs to hear right now.
That's true. And then the second one is always the inner reflection of your own character. When it comes to people coming out of their slums, community is important, yes, but the community always has to reinforce the correction of the character that is that person. People have bad habits. People have good habits. Habits can be retaught, and it really does come from coaching, mentoring, positive affirmation, and always just letting people know that, like, hey, just because you have a jacket doesn't mean that you always have to wear it. There's going to be days outside where it's warm. And so
that's a good analogy.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Yeah, I love that.
And so using that analogy, just I would say follow suit. Like, for example, there's individuals that, like me, I knew that I'm an ex-felon, but I did not let that deter me. I knew that really living in America, we can make the best out of our own lives. And even though I'm an ex-felon, I can say I put myself in the presence of great people. Sherry Garcia, if you don't know her, I'm surprised. Everybody knows Sherry. She's been doing great moves in Dallas-Fort Worth, especially with Cornbread Hustle. And these are the type of people that are out there. They're just waiting for you to tell yourself first that you're worth the shot. And as soon as you can tell yourself and believe in yourself that you're worth the shot, then they're ready for you.
Well, and the other thing that I dig what you guys are really doing is that what I've kind of really found is, we can protest all we want, we can bitch and moan all we want, but the reality comes down to it is that we have to be part of the solution, and we have to do something about it.
Exactly.
You guys saw a problem, and it's like, I'm going to start a staffing agency. It's going to give these guys a chance. It's not, maybe it's a drop in the bucket, but if other people see this and then all of a sudden, then maybe another person will start an agency, another person. Then we get enough attention, maybe we'll get some political change. But we have to do something, and that's what it seems like you guys basically just kind of did. Of, okay, this is our plan, much in a way that Bill and I with our podcast of, well, we're always talking about what's wrong, and okay, why don't we do something about it? All right, well, let's go on the radio.
What's stopping us?
What's stopping us? Maybe we'll. It's like the butterfly effect. 2 begets 4, 8, 12,
Well,
and
even if it just helps, it sounds cliche, but even if it just helps somebody, then we're doing something right. Maybe somebody somewhere will come across this podcast, and who knows? I don't know.
Well, just like with Sherry, she posted a video on LinkedIn, and I literally saw it. And I'm like, that resonates with me 1,000,000%. And now all of a sudden, however many people that saw that, and then however many people see this, and it is really inspiring. I think that I'm for the first time in a while, and I think it's funny. This podcast a lot of times was venting about frustrations, and maybe it'll have an effect. And now it's getting to the point where we're meeting and interviewing so many cool people that are all aligned, where even if we don't have the same exact understanding or the same exact view of the problem or answer, we're all doing something about it. And it's exciting for once to see so many people just going, hey, it's tough. It's going to be hard work, but I'm willing to do it because I believe in it. And we're just going to keep doing it. And that's our answer. And I dig that. And it's hopeful, because that's really what this country is about, I think. So it really is awesome. Now, I have a question for you now. I always say, like, if you really want to know if something is going to work, you ask somebody. So I have my own solution that I think, I don't know if it's the solution, but it's something where I'm like, okay, this might have a big effect. So I kind of got the idea. I don't know if you pay much attention to some of the other countries are doing with criminal justice reform, but I believe it was in Sweden. They have this whole theory of, well, if you treat people like prisoners, they're going to act like prisoners. So instead of just having them locked up in their jail cells and basically just doing everything that we've been doing, they treat them like human beings. They actually have like open gates, not like to the outside world, but like inside. They give them like jobs. They talk to them nicely. They retrain the guards. And there's a couple of prisons in the United States where they're trialing it out right now. And there's a learning curve because the guards, everyone has been trained one way, but a mysterious thing happens. They stop acting like inmates, and they legitimately just start. Once again, Juan, some of the things you're talking about. If I get treated like a human being, I feel respected as a human being. I act like a human being. And my whole thought is like, well, what if we start creating programs for maybe a certain level of prisoner? Maybe it's, certain levels of felonies or misdemeanors. Maybe you have to be approved for the program. But if we put them in that program from the start, or maybe it's like a leadership development program, they show certain characteristics.
Well, right, for the people that actually qualify and want to participate.
Because some people are just going to be.
Some people just don't want it.
But we identify them, and then if they successfully complete it, and what if they didn't have that felony on their record when they leave? So it's tough to get big companies to go, well, okay, with our insurance, we're cool with having somebody had a drug charge or a breaking and entering or whatever. But if that felony wasn't even on there, it was expunged, where then you could totally then short circuit trying to get companies and insurance companies to be okay with that. It's like that to me sounds like something where Congress could pass it. It's something that's doable. It's something that, might cost money, but I imagine it's going to save a bunch of money, because if people then start working and being tax-paying citizens, it'll pay for itself. I mean, I don't know. I mean, is that pie in the sky, Juan? Or is there something to that?
No, by no means is that too far out of reach. And I can say this, as far as like for the footsteps before that, I mean, I would love to see that happen. But as far as what I can do now, and here in this year, is give opportunities to fellow ex-felons. With Cornbread Hustle, we do filter our candidates at the same time. And however, we also have classes that give great education on an individual to be either an outstanding entrepreneur, because when it comes down to it, most drug cases, people are doing it because they just need money. They need money to get to their habit. And so when you get rid of the habit, now you still have the person's urge for uh, financial gains because they still need a house, they still need to try to pay for their food every day. And that's where we do our best to teach them entrepreneurship from our classes. We have guest speakers, and then through these courses, we watch them, we ask them questions, we have them get involved. We have community events, and as they get involved, we see their true character. We talk to them, we learn from them, we meet their family, they meet ours, and we place them just because we know who they are as an individual. We create and understand their character as a whole instead of a filter that's strictly through a screen or a phone call.
Yeah, it's amazing how when it's just like a simple thing, it's like, well, that ain't gonna work. But it's like, hey, we're touching this thing from every single different angle. That net, basically, that webbing is. It seems like that's where the secret sauce is. It's not just one thing. It has to be this like 360-degree kind of process. And I think it definitely works better than what we've been doing up to this point.
Gotta try something new.
Yeah, and this would be probably like my last big question, because all these things make all the sense in the world, and I always sit there and go, well, if it makes so much sense, why in the hell are we not doing it? And maybe this is something you can talk about, maybe you can't, maybe it's more of a Sherry thing, but what's the kickback on the governmental level? I mean, is there something that we're not getting that would make it be like, oh, that makes sense for why we're not already doing that? I mean, what kind of kickback, have you seen or heard as to why our government is not doing these things already?
Uh, well, I can't say that that's really my field of expertise. I know that there is tax benefits as far as to employers if they do hire ex-felons per se. So there are a few incentives, just not enough people know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Not enough people are aware that, look, we're losing our workforce one way or another, uh, uh, depending on who you hire, how they are hired, and how long they stay. Finding a good hire is tough, especially when it comes from an individual where you could get a potential tax break. So as long as they're caught up with what's already out there as far as the tax incentives. I mean, because we're going to be paying taxes for felons anyways. It'd just be easier if we just make it better on ourselves to put them back to work. Yeah.
And it, once again, makes all the sense in the world. Makes all the sense in the world. Bill, any last before we kind of start wrapping it? Bill, do you have any last questions for Juan, or any kind of things you just want to kind of?
Yeah, I do. One, you mentioned you were been incarcerated for about 6 or 7 years there.
Right.
How long? How into your stint did you realize, like, hey, I need to change this around, I need to turn this around, or did you know this right away, or was this something that maybe took you a little while when you were incarcerated for you to come to this conclusion, or like what was like the turning point for you? Did you know right away that that, hey, this life isn't for me, or was it something that it kind of took a minute of reflection?
Oh, well, waking up in jail that's when I realized this life wasn't for me.
Yeah. So you knew kind of early.
So that was like off the bat that I knew that. But as far as like actually getting sentenced and having to serve my time, I knew that I was in an emotional state that was basically like purgatory. I knew that I couldn't wake up and go home, and that I was stuck here, and I had to make some type of resolution with reality. So, being 19 and serving all of my early 20s in prison, for the first half of those 4 years, I'm sorry, for the 4 years out of the 8 that I of my sentence being incarcerated, I was I was just taking in my environment, realizing how much I knew, just because I really was fresh from high school, um, going straight into prison, and how much other people didn't know as far as not only basic education, but having an urge to travel in life. There's a lot of people who's been incarcerated who just hasn't gone outside of their own zip code. And over time, I just realized that, yeah, just because I'm an ex-felon, there's going to be more opportunities. It's not over. I still have things to learn. I didn't like complacency, so one of the things that I did was I tried to go to education. Um, and that's really what it comes down to. It's just, I realized my own worth. I knew that I could have been doing better. I knew that I had to find any opportunity to let people know that I still believe in me, and that everybody else around me, that they can still believe in them as well.
And this might be an unfair, impossible even question to ask, but fuck it, I'm gonna ask it anyway. You've been in jail. You've seen people. You've worked with people. You've seen who is gonna make it, who isn't. If you had to put like a rough percentage of felons, of the type of felon, we're not talking like, oh, I'm a murderer, I'm a hardcore, fill in the blank. I'm talking like people that, all right, like what percentage would you say that if given the right opportunity, basically the programs like you guys are doing or whatever else we would all come up with, what percentage do you think could really be turned around if you had to take a wild guess?
A wild guess?
Wild, educated, because you're let's be honest, you're gonna know probably a heck of a lot more than I would. And I think it's almost important going like, even if it was like 30%, 10%, 20%, it's like, that's still a huge number.
Yeah.
If you really think about it.
I would say from my own experience in participating in classes that involve character development, for one way or another, at least 40% have true potential.
That's
and
awesome.
They use that to their gainful advantage in a positive manner. In other words, the rest of the percentage is either filter out like they don't care, just because they don't know that they can believe in themselves, and they rather go back to their friends that are in the back of the room. But for those that actually apply and have the great opportunity, like sit down and say, hey guys, look, this is what we can learn. This is what you can benefit from it. You won't be stuck for the rest of your life. All you got to do is just believe in you, learn some trades, and find your niche.
And that's what's crazy. I mean, that's a huge number. And think about what the number I threw out there was, 18% of people who committed even like somewhat violent crimes, 18% said it was because of their addiction problem.
I believe it.
So imagine like what he's saying, 40% of all, I think can, then it's like, all right, of that, even, almost 20% of them are addicts. And think about, if you start doing the math of the downstream effects, the ripple effect, the butterfly effect, and not even that, think about the next generation, their kids, their community. You can't think of very many things that would have that profound of an effect over our country, people's lives for the better. It's almost sobering to think about it, and think about what we're all talking about here. We're not talking about rocket scientists. We're not talking about things we're over 20 years away from that. So no, we could be doing stuff now. We could be doing things now that can make that profound effect. I can't think of many things in this country, policies that would affect so many Americans in the present and in the future than what we're talking about here tonight. I guess it's still nuts to me of how doable it is, and we're not doing it. It's just nuts to me, and it's just really interesting of just a lot of what we kind of learned, tonight. A lot of these things, I've already kind of learned, but just hearing other people say it, and from a different perspective, it always is very humbling. And I think very, sometimes I have a very privileged job, and I think, Bill, you're probably getting an idea of what it's like for me as a clinician, where you're having people really talk about their lives, their experiences, and what they've learned, and it's cool. Not everyone has an opportunity to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I think one of the biggest things I am walking away with, or just more validated, is just the value of it as a human being, of feeling like I matter and I have value and I have hope. If we really look at even, bringing back to the dysfunction of our country right now. I mean, if you like Trump, not like Trump, I mean, it's neither here nor there right now. But you talk to people that were Trump supporters, like, why'd you vote for him? Because he made me feel like I matter, and I am willing to go to the umpteenth degree because he makes me feel like I matter. And I've never felt that. And even if that means, getting into spirited debates with people and, maybe I have to cut certain people off, I'm willing to do that because these people, we all matter together. You look even on the liberal side, whether it could be LGBTQ stuff, it could be, African Americans, Mexican Americans. It's, hey, this candidate, this part makes me feel like I matter, and I'm willing to fight for that beyond anything. And there's something to that as human beings and as a country. And when we make people feel like they matter. But the worst part of this country is when we, based on our lot in life, based on where we've grown up, how much money we have, what do I do for a living, I am better than you and you don't matter. Or my worth, my values, my life, my the things that bother me matter more because of those things. And it's, once again, to me, it's just so sobering of, you see where our salvation is as a country, but you also see where we've gone down this very wrong path. And once again, it doesn't take us much to get back, to that. And so one, I thank you for coming on and just having this conversation with us and sharing with us, because it's I know it's important. But I really think that I hope all of our listeners, they see how important it is what you're doing, and even zooming out with what we're trying to reflect back to our country and everybody else of what we need to be doing. And it's not very hard. Before we wrap up, where can we find Cornbread Hustle? Do your pitch, whatever you got to throw out there. Where can everyone find you guys?
Sure, of course, we're online. We're all over Facebook, but specifically online, go to www.cornbreadhustle, that's one word, cornbreadhustle.com. And should you want to look for job opportunities, that's cornbreadhustle.com/jobs/.
Awesome. Juan, I cannot thank you enough, man. Really, really, really awesome stuff, man. We would definitely love to have you guys back on the show. I know tonight we're kind of more tailoring it towards the addiction kind of piece, but I think just the criminal justice reform, is such a huge topic. So we definitely want to have you guys back on. Bill, any last words?
Juan, thanks again for, sharing your story and, being there for people that need help. And, it's really good to hear these stories because it helps put, faces to these issues we have. A lot of times I think, as people, and myself included, you think of numbers and stats and you don't always, you might know somebody, but when you think of it as a whole, you don't always think about the individual. You think as a generalization. So it's good to kind of hear these stories of recovery, of redemption, and things like that, and know that, hey, you know what? There is hope. There's hope for anyone that wants hope. I think there really is. So,
yeah,
absolutely.
Well, you got it, guys. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a real big honor.
Oh, we appreciate it, my man. So on that note, I guess that means it's time to wrap up there, isn't it? So on behalf of myself, Juan, Cornbread Hustle, Bill Reed, Armchair Quarterback, armchairquarterback.org. I'm Michael Devine. This is Gray Matters Radio. Just remember, the next time someone asks you, hey man, you Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, go fuck that noise.
I'm a flat earther. Does that count for anything?
Fuck that noise. My ass is gray. All right, everybody. You have a good evening. Peace.